Well, here we are again. It is March 20th. And what's new is this is the 48 volt setup, 12 turn work coil, added capacitors, fan to cool the capacitors, doubly thick wire. I don't know if that's going to be enough, but to try to keep that wire from overheating. And I think away we go. So let's see if it works. First I will power up the 48 volt power supply. And we're right on 48 volts. Now I'll turn on the cooling. Blowing on the capacitors, we're blowing on the circuit board. Water pump is pumping. Okay, the first test is just to see if this thing works at all. So I'll flip the switch. This is my little cover so I don't try to turn on 24 or 36 volts when I'm working on 48. I've got it disconnected anyway, but okay, I threw the switch. We have 6 amps of idling current. Feel the top coil here get a little bit warm right off the bat. Frequency 43.76. Wires are a little bit warm to the touch, not bad. Now I'm going to put the 1/2 inch bar in there and try to read the frequency. I just want to get an idea how much the frequency drops with the bar. 42, 41, 40. Got hot pretty quick. Hot to the touch. Oh, let me do that again because I want to record the current for my own edification. Wow. 35 amps, 32 amps at least, right away quick with that, with the 1/2 inch fully down in the coil. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this piece of 1/2 inch water pipe. I better watch the current here because I get up to 20, 24, 25 amps pretty darn quick. Frequency didn't drop as much, it got pretty hot pretty quick. So I certainly can transfer a lot of current. So far the capacitor wires are a little warm. Capacitors aren't too bad. Now the coil is just a little bit warm to the touch. It was getting too hot to touch. Water's up to 91. Idle current is about 7.5 amperes. And I'm going to stick this in here till I get maybe 22, 24 amps, 25 amps, 42 kilohertz. I guess I'm just going to hand hold this here. I should start my timer. 20 amps. It's already starting to glow. That I can see in here, you probably can't at this point. I'm pushing 26 amps right now. Heat sinks are a little warm. Capacitor leads aren't bad. The second capacitors aren't doing too bad. Whoops, I pulled it out of there. I must have gone above the Curie temperature because the current dropped to about 16 amps. Now I'm pushing it down in quite a bit further in order to get up to 22 amps again. We've been a little over a minute. I'm going to try to hold it steady. I'm probably cooking my insulation a little bit. Push it in some more. 22. Whoa. Gotta get rid of some water. Water's up to 98 degrees. Back and forth, still glowing a little bit. Back to, 30 amps. .24 I'm trying to stick at here. Boy, that water is really growing in there, isn't it? 98 degrees. Warm to the touch. Not too sure what I'm learning here right at this very moment. Because as part of the metal reaches the Curie temperature, the current drops, and I'm kind of hand holding it here, so that's not helping a whole lot. Water temperature 96. I don't know if this is going to do much for you here, but just trying to get down here a little closer. Hopefully you can see the scope here. I know triggering isn't great, but I don't know if you can read the frequency or not. I'm going to go up to like 26 amps. Okay, and that's what we got out of that. I'm not sure if we learned a whole lot right there. Now back to whatever it is, 7.5, 8 amps. Oh, the heat's coming off of that thing. Setting that down on the floor on a piece of fire brick. Try our piece of 1/2-inch water pipe here. 24 amps. Stayed about 43 kilohertz. If I go up really high, then it drops to 41 or 42, but I'm in the 30 amp range when I do that, so I don't want to do that. Water's 116. Pipe is glowing. The threads anyway. (23 amps). Water 118 degrees. It's about as hot as I want to get it, really. And the pipe is starting to get a little bit too hot to hold. It's actually orange looking to me. I'm sure it's white in the screen there. That's about as hot as I can hold it there. Okay. Again, not too sure what I learned out of this little test. Water's 120, voltage is 47.8, and I haven't been reading the temperature actually here. I just wanted to see if the setup would generally work, and we're in probably 6 or 7 minutes into this thing and haven't blown anything out today yet. The MOSFETs are cool. The board is maybe 110 degrees. Capacitors are nice and cool. The wires are a little warm, maybe 110. This is a little bit warm to the touch. Well, it's 125, I bet. Water's 120, so that's not a huge surprise. So that sure heated things up well. But that's my test for today of adding the cooling fan, doubling the capacitors, going to the 12-turn coil, and getting up to, or getting down to about 41, 42 kilohertz under load, 43 kilohertz idle current with just under 8 amps of idling current. Okay, here we go again. I've put my 1/2-inch nut in there and insulated it. And I guess you can't see it in there at the moment, but it's down in there with insulation over it. So we're going to see what happens with that. I may have to shut things off right away if the current goes up too far right away quick. But here we go. 10 amps. Water's cooled down to 104 from 120 something that it was. I suppose you can't see that all that well, but that's 117 degrees Celsius. Let's see. As usual, I forgot to turn this thing on at the right time, so we're now starting over at an hour, and I've already got probably 15 or 20 seconds in there. 10 amps. I thought we might have a little more current flow, but then the coil is wider. – 350 Celsius. Starting to glow. .44 kilohertz with just that small nut in there. 520 Celsius. It's kind of a medium to high orange, even to my eye, looking straight down in there. And now we're probably 2 minutes, 2 1/4 minutes. 10 amps, 9.5. We're past the Curie point, and I think really the current hasn't dropped very much at all. That's a good sign. Water down to 98 degrees. Feels plenty warm here, doesn't it? .700 Celsius. Staying at 10 amps, that's a good sign. I mean, that to me, that's a big difference, because it didn't drop when it went past the Curie point. And that's because we're at this 44 kilohertz with that baby in there. Exactly why that is, I don't know. I would have thought it would have heated up faster than that though too. But this is a 2-inch ID coil also. So it's continuing to heat up, but it's not all that fast. So I have to say I'm not too sure what I learned from this experiment. I think we actually got it hotter. That nut, this nut right here, hotter a week or two ago when we were running at the higher frequency, using maybe the double capacitors but the 6-turn work coil instead. Yeah, we're approaching 800 Celsius, but it's not rising all that fast, so I guess I'll just discontinue the test. I guess if there's something to be learned, it's that the current did not drop substantially when we went past the Curie point, and hopefully it's because of this lower frequency. Let's see. Of about 40, yeah, maybe it's bouncing around 40 something kilohertz. 810, 47.9, 10 amps on the meter, water at 118, and roughly 5 minutes into this particular test. That's it. Well, I'm back again, and the reason that I'm back again is that I just realized my thermocouple wasn't actually touching the nut. So now I'm going to kind of hold it in place there, and you can see the temperature going up pretty fast as the thermocouple catches up with what's actually going on in there. Water temperature 113, so obviously we aren't heating nearly as much material up, but there's 1,000 degrees Celsius. Sorry about wiggling around here. Current is still just staying up there at almost 10 amps, like 9.5. So it is getting a little hotter down there than I thought. Okay, this is another test of double capacitors, 12-turn coil. I'm going to try to start things correctly today by starting my my timer counting down from 1 hour right as I pull the switch. And I'm drawing 10 total amps, heating the half-inch 13 nut down in here with insulation. I added a little shield over my amp meter, so maybe we'll be able to see that on the video. 48 volts. 66 degrees water temperature. 200 Celsius so far, 47.8 on the power supply. Yeah, about 10 amps, 9.5. Temperature's up to 68 degrees, so that tells me the pump is actually circulating water. 400 Celsius, that's 1 minute into the test. Adding a little more insulation. I did this test yesterday or so, which was the first test of running at about 42, 43 kilohertz. But I'd forgotten that that I had this board in place to keep the fan from blowing through the slots in the work coil. And so I'm rerunning this part of the test to see if I can get up to a higher temperature with that, just heating that nut in a reasonable amount of time. So what's reasonable? I don't know. But now we are 2 minutes into the test. And we're 615 degrees Celsius. I can see a little bit of orange down in there. And again, about 9.5 amperes. I'm sure we're beyond the Curie temperature, the Curie point. and it really didn't drop significantly. The current didn't drop significantly. 47.9 volts out of the power supply, so that's working. 750 Celsius. Good orange glow down there. In the test the other day, I didn't have my thermocouple actually touching the nut, so I wasn't getting quite an honest reading. It was too low, actually. Move this around a little bit, reposition it down the hole there, so it's actually touching the side of the nut, and push my insulation back over the thing there to give it the best possible chance to get good and hot. Of course, heated up my tool real nice and quick. Now we're 860 Celsius. I don't know if you can see the glowing. I guess you can't just yet, really. But it's 877 Celsius. Let's see here. Anyway, it is glowing down in there. As far as I can tell, that's touching. I guess the point I want to make, we're still 9.5, almost 10 amps on the meter, but the idling current is about 6. So I'm afraid we're only imparting about 4 amps times roughly 50 volts or 200 watts really into that nut. So again, this is a 2-inch ID coil. If I had a smaller coil or a larger diameter part, we'd probably draw more current. That'll probably be my next test. But I did want to see how hot we can get here, or whether we get any hotter, I guess. I think we got up to just 1008 Celsius here the other day when I did this. So this barrier here doesn't seem to be making much difference today. It certainly is deflecting a lot of air from this fan upwards. And now, while the test is running, oops, I poked my finger there. Well, I could feel something. I guess I shouldn't be surprised if I feel across the two heat sinks. There's 80 volts there. But the heat sink, one heat sink is barely above ambient. The other one is barely above ambient. The bottom of the board is maybe 100 degrees. The wires to my added capacitors are maybe 100 degrees. The added capacitors are maybe 100 degrees. The capacitors on the board are maybe 105 or 110. We are now about 6 minutes into this test. If I hadn't said it before, I've got many hours on this particular board, and with no failures, knock on wood. But remember, as I keep saying, don't forget to take your board, take the MOSFET screws out, and put a good quality heatsink compound on there before you even get started. And the higher the voltage towards 48 for a power supply, the higher percentage of the time the MOSFETs are on. Seems counterintuitive, but go to my web page and you'll see the waveforms. Now we're almost 7 minutes in, 1000 degrees Celsius. Yeah, 9.5, 9 3/4 amps. Nice and hot down there, but that's what we got. 1004, 1005. Looks like that's going to be about it. That's about the same temperature we got when I did the earlier test with this exact setup. So I'm going to say that's it for this setup right here. Running around, this would be about 42, 43 kilohertz with this nut in there. The maximum temperature about 1010 degrees Celsius. Water temperature has gotten up to 107. Power supply 47.8. Current 10 amps. What else can I tell you? I guess that's kind of it for this test. Power off. Here's the next test. This is a 1 1/4 diameter by about 5/8 of an inch thick piece of mild steel. I'm going to stick that down in there, insulate it to some degree, and then we'll check to see what happens. Okay, just for the record, I just put the piece of steel in there. I've not insulated or added the thermocouple. I just want to see what kind of current we draw. This may be a short test. 22 amps. We'll go with that. Start adding some insulation in there. Things get hot pretty quick. That's not good. The insulation is even hot from the last test yet. So this probably isn't the right way to do things, but there it is anyway. Now I'll try to find a way to get the thermocouple down in there to touch it. Let's see. It's standing on end. Maybe that'll do it. We'll find out, I guess. Temperature dropped back, or the current, didn't I say was about 22 amps? Well, that already dropped back to 12. So we must have gone through the curing point. Well, how can we? 450. $522. Current's going back up a little bit. 12. $570. $620. 114 degree water. 47.8 volts. $670. Just about 3 minutes into this test. You can see the glow through the coils, or at least I can here. So that probably haven't insulated it all that well. I suppose I pushed it over to one side too, so that's not helping. $780 Celsius, water 120, current 12 and a half maybe. Oh, I see. When I'm sticking something in here, the current goes way up, doesn't it? Because I'm heating that too. up to 20 amps easily just by adding that rod. 8:56. We're now 4 minutes. The part must be right close to the edge of my insulation here, because I'm smelling a kind of a stinky smell. (908), 12, just a tiny tad over 12, 122 degree water, 47.8 volts on the power supply, pump's still pumping. But again, if we can assume correctly that if the idling current is 6 amps and we got 12 amps there, we're still only supplying 6 amps to the load there at 50 volts. So that's still only 300 watts that we're getting into the load. The insulation that's on this particular coil is electric motor winding insulation that I got early on. I just wanted to remind you and compare it to this, which is called 240 degree C fiberglass insulation, which I put on some of my other coils. It's a little bigger than that stuff is, so it fits over 1/4 inch American size copper tubing, 1/4 inch OD American size copper tubing, easier than that stuff does. That took me an hour to slide that on there. 987, 988. 132, never had the water this hot. It's starting to grow. It was down here, now it's up there. Whoops, looks like it pretty soon is going to want to pop out the top, but it's still got to fill the funnel. Remember that the nut stopped heating at 1008. Current still a little over 12, 47.8. MOSFET heat sinks are maybe 110 on that one, 105 on that one. Somebody talked about matching the Zainers up, and probably matching the MOSFETs wouldn't be a bad idea, because there is a little difference, just a couple degrees. The board underneath is about the same temperature, not very hot. Added capacitors are nice and cool. This wire is maybe 110, 115. The capacitors on the board are 95. 1050 Celsius. 7 minutes plus into the test. Water 141. Wow. Oh, we must have had an air bubble. Yeah, because the water went down. Nothing running on the floor. You can feel the radiator is that hot, so it's that hot. 1070. I've got it pretty well insulated, so there isn't much point in looking into the top down there, but you can see the glow coming through the insulation and between the windings. I think if we get to 1100 Celsius, I'll just chicken out and call it a day. But it's a bigger part. It only drew another amp or so more than the little nut, but it's heating up probably what, 8 or 10 times the volume of steel that the nut was. And you saw that we started out at 22 amps, and before very long we dropped down to this 12. So the Curie point certainly still is an issue. 1101 Celsius. I'm just going to call it here. That's how much we got out of it. 1105. Just to give you final readings, water's 152 degrees. This little pump is called a hot water or hot solar water heater pump, or solar water heater pump. Yep, I guess so. So it's supposed to handle 180 degree water. Last readings here. MOSFET heat sinks, nice and cool, folks. Nice and cool. Nice and cool. Capacitors are almost cold. These capacitors, the ones on the board itself, are just basic, very barely hot. Still drawing 12 amps. I guess I need to put more material in there. I'll try that another day. 1120 Celsius. Oop, all of a sudden we may be boiling water. I better shut things off here. Yep, that's it. 1118 Celsius. Oh yes, there's smoke, steam coming out of here now. So that's probably enough on the water, 150 degrees. So if it's 150 degrees back there in the radiator, not surprising it'd be a little bit hotter in here. And I certainly don't want to boil things. So, so there we go, another test. Maybe a little more knowledge than we had before. Things have been off for a couple of minutes now, and that part is still at 900 degrees Celsius. That's still hot enough to forge, and it's apparently got heated all the way through.